Good morning, you're watching A News. I'm Dilek Tuna. Here are the top stories for the hour. Trump urges Erdogan to stop buying Russian oil as the two leaders meet for the first time since 2019. Donald Trump signs an executive order on TikTok to pave the way for US ownership. And the Israeli military launches airstrikes on Yemen, killing 8 people. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has wrapped up his first White House visit in 6 years, meeting President Donald Trump. The two leaders signalled a reset in US-Turkey ties, discussing defence, trade, energy and regional security, and even signing a new civil nuclear cooperation deal. Let's take a look.
Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has concluded talks with US President Donald Trump at the White House, his first visit in 6 years. The leaders discussed defense, energy, trade, and regional security, indicating a potential reset in Turkey-US relations. During the visit, the two countries signed a memorandum of understanding on strategic civil nuclear cooperation. Turkish Energy Minister Alparslan Bayraktar said the accord would deepen the deep-rooted and multidimensional partnership between Turkey and the United States in nuclear energy. Trump said sanctions on Turkey's defense sector could be lifted soon, depending on the outcome of the talks. The potential sale of US F-35 fighter jets also remains under consideration.
We're going to be discussing the Patriot system, which is the best system. We'll discuss that. We're going to discuss the F-35. We'll be discussing all of the things that you know about and that some of that you mentioned. And I think he'll be successful with buying the things he'd like to buy.
Erdogan described the visit as an opportunity to strengthen ties, highlighting discussions on F-35 and F-16 jets, economic cooperation, and progress on reopening the Halki Theological School, closed since 1971, a long-standing point of interest for Greece and the European Union. Trump praised Erdogan as a very tough man and reaffirmed their personal friendship. He also stressed Turkey's role as a NATO ally and welcomed Ankara's plans to halt Russian oil imports, saying, "I believe he will stop it," signaling alignment on energy policy. The meeting reflected a thaw in Turkey-US relations, with both leaders signaling intentions to pursue closer strategic, defense, and economic cooperation.
President Donald Trump has signed off on a $14 billion deal to shift TikTok's US operations into American hands. The deal limits Chinese ownership to less than 20% and imposes US oversight of the app's algorithms and data flows.
President Donald Trump has signed an executive order on Thursday approving the sale of TikTok's US operations to a group of American and global investors. The deal, valued at about $14 billion, ensures the popular app will remain available to its 170 million US users while meeting the requirements of a 2024 law demanding Chinese divestment. Trump has long argued that Chinese ownership of TikTok posed risks to US data security and political influence. The new entity will be mainly US-owned, with ByteDance retaining less than a 20% stake. According to the order, TikTok's algorithms and data flows will be strictly monitored, and a mostly American board will oversee operations.
This is going to be American-operated all the way, and great respect for President Xi, and I very much appreciate that he approved the deal, because to get it done properly, we really needed the support of China and the approval of China.
The White House values the new entity at $14 billion, far below some estimates of up to $40 billion, and Trump has named possible investors, including tech billionaire Michael Dell and media mogul Rupert Murdoch. Analysts warn that the move could open the door to new kinds of influence. Casey Myers, a public relations professor at Virginia Tech, says the biggest question is whether ownership changes will affect what people see on TikTok.
There's also this question, this larger question that is really unanswerable at this time, in that if media moguls who have media companies that produce content are part of the deal, does their content then start showing up in people's feeds? And does the feed experience change for the individual user? Now, there are those who are arguing that it will. There's those that say that it won't. And ultimately, time will tell. But that is a real question about not only just the technology behind the app or technology behind the social media platform, but also that user experience and the content that it shares and how that relates to the shaping of public opinion.
Investors say the final structure is not yet fixed, and the size of individual stakes could still shift as negotiations continue.
Former FBI Director James Comey has been indicted by a federal grand jury. He faces charges of false statements and obstruction and could face up to 5 years in prison if convicted. The charges stem from Comey's 2020 Senate testimony, where he denied authorizing the FBI to leak details of the Russia election interference probe. In a video statement, Comey insisted on his innocence. Comey, known as a longtime critic of US President Donald Trump, testified against him in 2020. President Donald Trump, meanwhile, celebrated the indictment in a post on Truth Social.
Although we did not find clear evidence.
At the United Nations, Palestinian Authority President Mahmoud Abbas has denounced Hamas' October 7th attack on Israel, saying the group will have no place in governing a future Palestinian state. Abbas delivered his remarks by video after the US revoked his visa ahead of the 80th UN General Assembly.
We have affirmed, and we will continue to affirm, that the Gaza Strip is an integral part of the state of Palestine, and that we are ready to bear full responsibility for governance and security there. Hamas will not have a role to play in governance. Hamas and other factions will have to hand over their weapons to the Palestinian National Authority.
Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu will be addressing the United Nations on Friday. The international community has been waiting for his speech as Israel faces mounting global pressure to end the war in Gaza and its occupation of the West Bank, with a growing wave of Western nations formally recognizing an independent Palestinian state.
Nearly 2 years after the deadly events of the 7th of October, 2023, the war in Gaza remains one of the most devastating and consequential conflicts of the 21st century, according to many countries. The crisis began when Hamas and allied militants launched a cross-border assault on southern Israel, killing more than 1,000 people and 251 hostages. The unprecedented attack triggered a massive Israeli military response, including airstrikes and a ground operation. Since then, the scale of destruction has been catastrophic. Large swaths of Gaza have been reduced to rubble, hospitals and schools destroyed, and essential infrastructure decimated. Humanitarian agencies warn that the Strip is now on the brink of famine, with food, water, medicine, and electricity in desperately short supply. Tens of thousands of Palestinians have been killed, with the death toll now surpassing 65,400, according to local authorities. Thousands more have been injured, and millions have been displaced, most forced into overcrowded shelters or temporary camps. The human cost of the conflict has reshaped international opinion. Over the past year, a growing number of countries, now more than 150, have officially recognized the State of Palestine, signaling a major diplomatic shift. Governments across Europe, Latin America, Africa, and Asia say the move supports a two-state solution and responds to what many view as collective punishment in Gaza, an accusation that Israel denies. These geopolitical shifts are unfolding as Israel faces mounting criticism at the United Nations and in international courts, with accusations of war crimes and calls for accountability. In this climate, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is set to address the UN General Assembly. He is expected to defend Israel's military campaign and reject the wave of Palestinian recognitions.
Israel struck the Yemeni capital of Sana'a on Thursday, killing at least 8 people and wounding more than 140 others. The attack struck the densely populated Al-Raqqas neighbourhood, leaving buildings in ruins and residents scrambling to recover. Israel said Air Force aircraft and fighter jets hit targets belonging to the Houthi group. Israel's attack came a day after the rebels launched a drone attack on southern Israel. Former French President Nicolas Sarkozy has been jailed for 5 years after being found guilty of criminal conspiracy over alleged funding from Libya for his 2007 election campaign. Our correspondent Ross Cullen has more from Paris.
Well, this is an historic day for French justice and for French politics. The former president sentenced to 5 years in jail for criminal conspiracy. He was acquitted of 2 other charges of corruption and also acquitted of the concealment of embezzled funds. He denied wrongdoing throughout this case, and he did also speak about that after the judgment was pronounced here in Paris on Thursday, saying that it was a scandal, it was injustice, that there would be extreme consequences for the French rule of law with this legal decision. Also saying that if he did need to spend time in prison, he would do so with his head held high, saying that he would fight until his dying breath to prove his complete innocence. The judge in this case did say that even if appeal against the decision were launched, Nicolas Sarkozy would be spending some time behind bars. It's not his first brush with the law. We did see a previous conviction for trying to bribe a judge. For that, he had to wear an electronic tag for 3 months. Another conviction of drawing up fake bills to hide illegal campaign overspending in his ultimately unsuccessful bid for re-election in 2012. An appeal has been launched against that verdict. But this one, tied to the allegations of illicit campaign financing by the Libyan regime of Muammar Gaddafi, was certainly the most serious one yet. Prosecutors allege that Nicolas Sarkozy received millions of dollars in cash in return for helping Muammar Gaddafi to rehabilitate his image on the world stage after years as a pariah. Certainly a lot of political intrigue in this case as well, because one of the men who did say that he delivered the suitcases of cash to Nicolas Sarkozy and then retracted his testimony, well, he was found dead in Lebanon last week. So certainly lots of political intrigue to this, which certainly was a historic decision in terms of French justice. Ross Cullen for A News in Paris.
To a major diplomatic moment now, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger say they are leaving the International Criminal Court, accusing it of bias and neo-colonialism.
3 West African countries, Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger, have announced plans to withdraw from the International Criminal Court. The military-led governments issued a joint statement calling the Hague-based tribunal an instrument of neo-colonial repression and accusing it of selective justice. The ICC was created in 2002 to prosecute individuals for genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes and aggression. It is intended to act when national courts are unwilling or unable to prosecute. Out of 33 cases brought since its inception, most have involved African countries, fueling long-standing criticism of anti-African bias. Withdrawal from the ICC takes effect 1 year after formal notification to the United Nations. The decision mirrors the 3 states' earlier exit from the West African bloc ECOWAS, as they push to build their own regional institutions under the Alliance of Sahel states. The current authorities of these countries say the court has failed to deliver genuine justice and instead reinforces outside influence over African nations. They argue the withdrawal is a step toward building their own systems of peace and accountability.
And now BP's latest Energy Outlook report says the future of the world's energy use will depend on how quickly we become more efficient. The new report predicts that the use of fossil fuels is expected to shrink, as electricity use led by solar and wind could grow and double by 2050. Oil demand is expected to decline overall, especially in transport, as more cars go electric. However, it will remain a key part of the energy system for at least the next decade, largely due to continued demand in the petrochemical sector, where plastics keep crude oil in use. Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev has addressed the 80th session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York. In his speech, he outlined the country's path from decades of conflict to peace, reconstruction and growing regional connectivity.
Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev addressed the 81st session of the United Nations General Assembly in New York on 25th September, outlining his country's path from conflict to peace, reconstruction and expanding regional connectivity. Aliyev opened his keynote by recalling nearly 3 decades of Armenian occupation of almost 20% of Azerbaijan's territory, which displaced 1 million people and left hundreds of settlements destroyed. He noted that UN Security Council resolutions adopted in 1993 demanding Armenia's withdrawal were never enforced.
In 2020, after almost 30 years of ineffective negotiations, Azerbaijan was forced to exercise its legitimate right to self-defense under Article 51 of the UN Charter. During the war, Armenia shelled our towns and cities with ballistic missiles and cluster munitions, killing more than 100 of innocent civilians. Azerbaijan, in its turn, conducted the war in strict compliance with international humanitarian law. In 44-day patriotic war, our armed forces liberated occupied territories and restored Azerbaijan's territorial integrity in accordance with international law and relevant UN Security Council resolutions. The 10 November 2020 marked the capitulation of Armenia and restoration of Azerbaijan's territorial integrity after nearly 30 years of occupation.
Aliyev said Azerbaijan pursued bilateral negotiations with Armenia free from external interference following the end of the conflict. These talks culminated in the signing of a peace agreement at the White House in August 2025, witnessed by US President Donald Trump, and led to the closure of the OSCE Minsk group, which he described as an obsolete mechanism.
On August 8 this year, the foreign ministers of Azerbaijan and Armenia in Washington, in the White House, in presence of the leaders of the United States, Azerbaijan and Armenia, initialed the text of peace agreement. The same day, the President of Azerbaijan and the Prime Minister of Armenia signed the joint declaration. President of the United States, Donald Trump, also signed it as a witness. Moreover, Azerbaijan and Armenia jointly appealed for the closure of the OSCE Minsk group and related structures as an obsolete mechanism no longer relevant to the peace process. Accordingly, on 1 September, the OSCE adopted a decision to permanently close these structures. We won both war and peace. We ended the occupation and started reconstruction. Justice has triumphed. Sovereignty has been consolidated, and peace is de facto reached.
The president also highlighted ongoing reconstruction efforts in the liberated territories. More than 50,000 people have already returned to live, work and study, though landmines and the fate of thousands missing from the early 1990s remain critical humanitarian concerns.
We are rebuilding villages and cities razed to the ground. Under the Great Return Program, already more than 50,000 people live, work, and study in the liberated territories. One of the gravest humanitarian challenges facing Azerbaijan in the post-conflict period is landmine contamination during the time of Armenian occupation. Since November 2020, more than 400 Azerbaijani civilians and military personnel were killed or seriously injured by landmine explosions. This massive contamination obstructs the safe return of displaced persons and delays reconstruction projects.
Aliyev also recalled Azerbaijan's contributions of international aid, including donations of protective equipment, medical devices, and vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic. He underlined Azerbaijan's energy and regional connectivity strategy, highlighting gas exports to 14 countries, investments in renewables with a target of 40% of energy from solar, wind, and hydro by 2030.
Azerbaijan has established itself as a reliable and indispensable partner in providing energy security to many countries. We play a strategic role connecting the Caspian region with international markets through diversified oil and gas pipeline systems. As of today, we are supplying natural gas to 14 countries. This ranks Azerbaijan as a top country in the world in terms of number of countries it supplies with pipeline gas. The Baku-Tbilisi-Kars Railroad, 9 international airports, the biggest air cargo company in the region, and many other factors have turned Azerbaijan into one of international transport hubs.
President noted Azerbaijan's role in global climate action, including hosting COP29, advancing the Baku finance target, and calling for joint efforts to protect the Caspian Sea from environmental degradation.
We achieved important outcomes in advancing climate action, the green transition, and equitable access to financing. As a host of COP29, we guided negotiations towards ambitious and balanced outcomes, ensuring that all voices, particularly those of the developing world, were heard. The adoption of the new collective quantified goal at COP29, also known as Baku Finance Goal, is a historic milestone in global climate finance. This commitment brings previous $100 billion annual climate finance goal to at least $300 billion per year through 2035 from public sources in developed countries to developing countries.
Aliyev concluded by emphasizing Azerbaijan's success in ending occupation, securing peace, and rebuilding the country, while underlining the need for international law to prevail, justice to be applied equally, and peace to be achieved through concrete action rather than words.
At the United Nations, Azerbaijan's president met with UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres at the UN headquarters. They discussed the peace process with Armenia, reconstruction and climate action, with both leaders praising Azerbaijan's progress and regional role. The Baku Initiative Group is continuing to support the legitimate struggle of colonised countries across international platforms. This time the stage is New York, where the group has been organising an international conference at the United Nations. Executive Director Abbas Abbasov told A News about the organisation's mission and more.
In terms of our organization mission, I have to say that we have successfully achieved the conveying of the issues on colonialism and neocolonialism to the agendas of such intergovernmental organizations as United Nations, OEC, NAM and others. And secondly, we have already raised awareness of the global community on decolonization matters and consequences of colonialism. As Baku Initiative Group, we covered all political aspects, but also covered all economic issues and negative impacts of colonial policies. During General Assembly, during High Weeks, Baku Initiative Group conducted 3 international events for the last 3 years. And I would like to highlight that the role of our organization on contribution to the decolonization process is sufficiently high.
Russian President Vladimir Putin met with Armenian Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan in Moscow on Thursday. They discussed bilateral trade, which hit a record $11 billion this year. Energy cooperation was another focus, particularly Armenia's nuclear power plant, which provides around 30% of the country's electricity. Putin noted that Russia is working to extend the plant's operational life. The meeting followed the Global Atomic Forum, part of World Atomic Week, where both leaders participated.
This is a great day for
Turkey has temporarily deployed an airborne warning and control system aircraft to Lithuania as part of NATO security measures. The mission follows repeated violations of Baltic and Polish airspace by Russian drones and fighter jets, which NATO officials say are aimed at testing the alliance's readiness. These military aircrafts can detect low-flying drones and other objects that ground-based radars may miss. Kazakhstan and Hungary are strengthening their partnership with a major new infrastructure project. Plans are underway to build an intermodal terminal in Budapest by 2026, aiming to boost trade and logistics between Central Asia and Europe. This initiative is part of a broader strategy to enhance transport routes, economic cooperation and investment opportunities between the two countries. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina has more.
Kazakhstan and Hungary have planned the construction of an intermodal terminal in Budapest before the end of 2026. This issue is a key point on the agenda during the meeting between the Prime Minister of the Republic of Kazakhstan, Olzhas Bektenov, and the Speaker of the Hungarian National Assembly, Laszlo Kövér. The parties paid special attention to the development of the Trans-Caspian international transport route. This route is already being integrated into the Trans-European transport network and opens new logistics opportunities for Kazakh cargo on its way to Europe. The future terminal in Budapest is planned to be developed jointly with the Hungarian company LAC Holding. Its annual throughput capacity will be 230,000 containers. The project is expected to reduce delivery times, lower transportation costs, and minimize transshipment processes. The well-developed transport infrastructure of the Hungarian capital will ensure convenient multimodal delivery across Europe. It's important to note that over the past 5 years, cargo volumes along this route have increased sixfold and reached 2.5 million tons. And in the future, volumes are planned to grow to 10 million tons per year. However, cooperation between Kazakhstan and Hungary is not limited to logistics. The agenda also includes trade and economic cooperation, investment partnerships, the development of joint ventures, as well as the construction of new production facilities. Hungary remains an important partner for Kazakhstan within the European Union. And last year, trade turnover between the countries grew by 6.4%, reaching around $200 million. In the first 7 months of this year, growth already reached 27%, with a volume exceeding $150 million. The government emphasizes that Kazakhstan is ready to expand exports to Hungary in 95 product categories. This opens up significant potential for trade growth and strengthening economic ties. From Almaty, Kazakhstan, Fariza Kalimurzina, A News.
The European Bank for Reconstruction and Development has upgraded its economic growth forecast for Central Asia in 2025 to 6.1%. That's up from 5.5%. The bank kept the 2026 growth forecast steady at 5.2%, citing strong industrial output, stable domestic demand, rising investment, higher real wages and remittances as key growth drivers. Kyrgyzstan is expected to lead the region with 9% growth in 2025, followed by Tajikistan, Uzbekistan, Kazakhstan, Mongolia and Turkmenistan. The national cultural pavilions have officially opened in Tashkent, reflecting Uzbekistan's commitment to interethnic harmony, friendship and the preservation of cultural heritage. The opening follows the presidential decree of March 2025, which outlined measures to strengthen national solidarity and ties with compatriots abroad. Our Sevil Rajapova has more from Tashkent.
22 national cultural pavilions have been inaugurated in Tashkent, each dedicated to the traditions and heritage of different nationalities living in Uzbekistan. The pavilions were launched in honor of the Day of Friendship of Peoples, celebrated annually on July 30th. Each pavilion showcases household items, artworks, musical instruments, and traditional performances that vividly reflect the diversity of cultures. Among the presented ethnicities are Korean, Belarusian, Ukrainian, Greek, German, Dongan, Polish, Jewish, and others.
Over the past 7 to 8 years, people's diplomacy in Uzbekistan has evolved into a distinct and fully fledged institution. Why is it important? Because interaction between countries should not be confined to official channels alone. Ordinary citizens, through what is often called people-to-people diplomacy, play a vital role in complementing intergovernmental relations. In the early stages of our development, we focused on learning from the experiences of other countries. Now, as part of our 5-year strategy, we aim to expand our presence by establishing branches of our centre across Uzbekistan and significantly broadening our outreach.
For reference, out of Uzbekistan's population of about 36.5 million, more than 1.7 million are Tajiks, around 900,000 are Kazakhs, about 800,000 are Kyrgyzstans, and approximately 500,000 are Tatars, along with many other ethnic communities who contribute to the country's cultural mosaic. It is Sevil Rajapov reporting from Tashkent, Uzbekistan, A-News.
Baku is buzzing with world-class figure skating as the Junior Grand Prix continues. The competition has already delivered impressive performances and surprises, and on Friday all eyes will be on the victory ceremony. Our Narchichek Jahangirli has more.
The 2021 ISU Junior Grand Prix of figure skating has entered its second day. Today the men are performing their free programs on the ice, while the pairs are competing with their short dance routines.
On the second day, the skating pairs dazzled the ice with their electrifying performances. Anna O'Brien and Derek Tong, representing Azerbaijan in pairs, performed to an energetic folk rock song that cheered up the crowd.
We've been working really hard. We've been doing run-throughs, we've been doing exercises. I mean, we have great coaches. We have Kristen Igor, choreographer, Caitlin Weaver as well. We've been doing everything that's needed to be done, and we're really glad to debut here.
Yes, we're very happy with how we skated, and it's so special to be able to do it in the country that we represent, and I think the event was organized so well. Once the music starts, I'm not nervous anymore. You know, it's great to hear all the clapping. The crowd here is also great.
We have also spoken with their coach, who said that their goal is to raise interest in figure skating, and so far he believes they are achieving that.
We started in August 2024 with the ISU granting us that amazing opportunity, and the whole Winter Sport Federation was very hard with the head of the federation and with everyone who is in that team, and the whole experience of that, especially my little part of that, was, even though it was very hard, it was still very exciting process.
The short program for women took place on Wednesday. According to the results, Israeli skater Sophia Shifrin placed first, Chinese skater Yihan Wong came second, and South Korean skater Hee-won Ju finished third. Among the athletes representing Azerbaijan, Irina Kalukina achieved the best result, placing sixth. In total, 92 skaters from 38 countries are participating in the tournament. On Friday, the final day, the free dance and women's free program will decide the champions.
And that's the news update from us in Baku this morning. Stay tuned to A News for more.